Want to hear a story that will give you nightmares? Watch until the end to see what happens, because the scary elevator tale will creep you out. Oh, I almost forgot! Don't watch this video alone.
I used to work the elevator in the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel in Los Angeles. I'd served my time in the Marines, and got an honorable discharge, and was ready to go to work. The hotel was owned by a big company with a managing committee of retired officers, and my late captain was one of them. He was a good-tempered man, and when I asked him for a job, "Joe," he says, "you're the very man to work the elevator at the Hollywood Roosevelt. Sailors are civil and businesslike, and the public likes them. We've had to give our last man the boot, and you can take his place." I liked my work well enough, and my pay was decent too. All in all, it was a pretty easy job. Our elevator was built in the 1920s, but it was solid. It ran as smooth as oil, a child could have worked it, and it was safe as standing on the ground. Instead of being stuck full of advertisements, we had elegant mirrors in it, and the ladies would look at themselves when I was taking them downstairs, as they were typically dressed up for an evening out. It was a little sitting room, with green leather cushions to sit down on, and it would float you up or float you down light as a feather. I was in charge of the elevator from noon till midnight. By that time, the theater and dining out folks had come in, and anyone returning later would walk upstairs, because my day's work was done. One of the porters worked the elevator till I arrived in the morning, but before noon there was not much going on, and not much till after 2 p.m. Then it was pretty busy with visitors going up and down constantly, and the electric bell ringing you from one floor to another like a fire alarm. Then it would slow down during dinner, and I'd sit down and relax for a bit. I always noticed faces as people got in the elevator, and I had an eye for detail and a good memory. None of the visitors needed to tell me twice where to take them. I knew them, and I knew their floor almost as well as they did. It was in November that Colonel Mosley came to the hotel. I noticed him particularly, because you could see at once that he was a soldier. He was a tall, thin man about 50, with a hawk nose, keen eyes, and a gray mustache, and walked stiff from an old bullet in his knee. But what I noticed most was the large scar across the right side of his face. As he got into the lift to go to his room on the 4th floor, I thought what a difference there is among officers. Colonel Mosley reminded me of a telephone pole for height and thinness, and my old captain was like a barrel in uniform, but a brave soldier and a gentleman all the same. Colonel Mosley's room was number 410, just opposite the glass door leading to the lift, and every time I stopped on the 4th floor, number 410 stared me in the face. The colonel used to go up in the elevator every day, though he never came down in it till. But I'm coming to that. Sometimes, when he was alone in the elevator, he'd speak to me. He asked me where I'd served, but I can't say he was comfortable to talk to. There was something standoffish about him, and he always seemed deep in his own thoughts. He never sat down in the elevator. Whether it was empty or full, he stood bolt upright under the light, where the light fell on his pale face and scarred cheek. One day in February I didn't take the colonel up in the elevator, and as he was regular as clockwork, so I noticed it, but I supposed he'd gone away for a few days, and I thought no more about it. At the end of a week I heard a chambermaid say that Colonel Mosley was ill, so that's why he hasn't been in the lift lately. It was a Tuesday night, and it was oddly busy. It was one stream of traffic up and down, and so it went on the whole night. It was on the strike of midnight, and I was about to put out the light in the elevator, lock the door, and leave the key in the office for the man in the morning, when the electric bell rang out sharp. I looked at the dial, and saw I was wanted on the 4th floor. It struck 12 as I stepped into the elevator. As I passed the 2nd and 3rd floors, I wondered who it was that had rung so late, and thought it must be a stranger that didn't know the rules. But when I stopped at the 4th floor and the door opened, Colonel Mosley was standing there wrapped in a military cloak, and the door of his room was shut behind him. I thought he was ill in his bed, and ill enough he looked, but he had his hat on, and why would a man that had been in bed for 10 days want to go out on a winter night? I don't think he saw me, but when I'd set the elevator in motion, I looked at him standing under the light, with the shadow of his hat hiding his eyes, and the light full on the lower part of his face, that was deadly pale, and the scar on his cheek showing still paler. "Glad to see you're better, sir," I said, but he said nothing, and I didn't want to look at him again. He stood like a statue with his cloak on, and I was downright glad when I opened the door of the elevator for him to step out into the hall. "The Colonel wants to go out," I said to the night porter who stood staring, and he opened the door and Colonel Moseley walked out into the cold and wet night. "That's weird," he said. "It is," I said. "I don't like the Colonel's looks. He doesn't seem himself at all. He's ill enough to be in his bed, and there he is going out on a night like this. Anyhow, he's got a fancy cloak to keep him warm. He's probably going to a fancy ball, and got that cloak on to hide his dress," said the porter, laughing uneasily, for we both felt more uneasy than we cared to say. As we spoke, there came a loud ring at the door. "No more passengers for me," I said, and I was really putting the light out this time. When Landry opened the door, two gentlemen entered that I knew at first glance were doctors. One was tall, and the other was short and stout, and they both came to the elevator. "Sorry, gentlemen, but it's against the rule for the elevator to go up after midnight." "Nonsense," said the stout gentleman. "It's only just past 12, and a matter of life and death. Take us up at once to the 4th floor," and they were in the elevator instantly. So up we went, and when I opened the door, they walked straight to room 410. A nurse came out to meet them, and the stout doctor said, "No change for the worse, I hope?" And I heard her reply, "The patient died 5 minutes ago, sir." Though I'd no business to speak, that was more than I could stand. I followed the doctors to the door and said, "There's some mistake here, gentlemen. I took the Colonel down in the elevator 5 minutes ago, and he went out." The stout doctor said sharply, "A case of mistaken identity. It was someone else you mistook for the Colonel." "Begging your pardon, gentlemen, it was the Colonel himself, and the night porter that opened the front door for him knew him as well. He was dressed for a night like this, with his military cloak wrapped round him." "Step in and see for yourself," said the nurse. I followed the doctor into the room, and there lay Colonel Moseley looking just as I had seen him a few minutes before. There he lay, dead as his forefathers, and the great cloak spread over the bed to keep him warm, but he would feel heat and cold no more. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up with Joe, expecting every minute to hear the Colonel ring the front door bell. The next day, every time the bell for the elevator rang sharp and sudden, I broke out in a sweat and I shook again. Me and Joe told the manager about what happened with the Colonel, and he said we'd been dreaming, but, he said, "Don't even think about talking about it, or the hotel will be empty in a week." The Colonel's coffin was brought into the hotel the next night. Me and the manager and the undertaker's men took it up in the elevator, with not an inch to spare. They carried it into room 410, and while I waited for them to come out again, an eerie feeling came over me. Then the door opened softly, and 4 men carried out the long coffin straight across the hall, and set it down with its foot towards the door of the elevator, and the manager looked round for me. "I can't do it, sir," I said. "I can't take the Colonel down again. I took him down at midnight yesterday, and that was enough for me." "Push it in," said the manager, speaking short and sharp, and they ran the coffin into the elevator without a sound. The manager got in last, and before he closed the door he said, "Joe, you've worked this elevator for the last time." And I had. I wouldn't have stayed on at the Hollywood Hotel after what had happened, not if they'd doubled my pay, and me and the night porter left together.